Bill Van Gilder's work can be seen on 6 continents. His pots are in museums, private collections, and galleries around the world.
The teapot is one of the more complicated, yet formal pieces of pottery you'll ever make. A well-designed teapot is made from 5 pieces: the pot, a spout, a lid, its knob, and a handle. I'm also going to show you how to decorate it with a technique we call faceting. I'm going to show you some new techniques on how to create these parts and assemble them into a really well-designed functional piece. First thing we've got to do is get our clay ready.
To make the teapot, you'll need 6½ pounds of clay, a sponge on a stick, a ruler, a cheese cutter, an undercut rib tool, a small rubber rib, a hole cutter, a wire knife, a textured pad, a wooden dowel, a trimming tool, a sanding pad, a dust mask, wax-resist emulsion, and 2 glazes.
The first step in making the teapot is to create the body of the pot. I'm going to make the walls of this pot twice as thick as I normally would, at least ½ an inch, because I'm going to facet the sides of it. I'm going to cut half the wall away. So let's get that thrown.
Bill is using 2½ pounds of clay to throw the body of the teapot.
I'm going to open the pot with a really flat base inside. Now, as I draw these walls upward, I'm really conscious of the distance between my fingertips because I want that wall to remain at least ½ an inch thick.
Bill begins the body of the teapot by throwing a cylindrical form.
This top area becomes this flattened area that leads to the lid. But from the foot to the shoulder, that's the part that's going to be faceted. So I'm going to smooth it out. I'm going to create an angle at the top of the cylinder, right here, and push the top rim inward a little bit. And lastly, I'm going to undercut and create a deep bevel at the foot of the pot. And now we're ready to facet. I love doing this because I'm going to change this round pot into a very squared off pot. Now, that bevel's important because with this cheese cutter, my faceting tool, I've got to get this wire underneath the wall of the pot to draw it up through the wall.
Bill rotates the body as he cuts the facets, always working at 3 o'clock.
All right, that's 8 facets around the pot. The next step is to clean out the excess water. Now I'm going to actually put a little bit more water back into the pot, but only on the inside walls. And I'm dripping water from the tip of this sponge just at the rim so it runs down the inside. That makes it really slippery for my fingertips to now push this into its final form.
Changing the shape of the body gives a dramatically different look to the whole teapot. Bill's put other body designs on DIYnetwork.com.
I'm not going to push this out with the wheel moving slowly, but if I speed up the wheel, it all becomes a blur, and I can see what the profile is. And I'm going to use my stick and kind of force this rim back in. Now I'm using the broad pad of my fingers inside and slowly coming from the foot all the way to the rim, pushing it outward while my eye watches the profile change on the outside. Now I'm going to remove that water I put in a minute ago.
Bill measures the opening for the lid. He wants it to be 2½ inches, but it's only 2 1/4.
So I'm going to slowly stretch it outward. I'm going to grasp the rim, top and bottom, inside and outside, put my first finger on the rim, and stretch it outward, just a fraction. Last thing I'm going to do is use the broad side of my undercutting stick and create a little step just outside the rim at the 3-inch mark. Now I'm pushing the clay upward from the inside against the stick.
The step is a wax guideline. It also elevates the lid from the pot, so the lid won't kiss the body and fuse to it when Bill fires the glazed teapot.
Okay, there's the body of the teapot made.
When DIY's throwing clay continues, Now Bill is ready to throw the lid and the spout from the same lump of clay.
All right, I'm going to make the lid first. I know that it has to be 2½ inches to fit into the top of the teapot, And the outside rim has to be 3 inches. I'm also going to make it with some neck here. So I'm going to use this lump of clay and create a little knob at the top. I'm pushing my hand in about 1 inch below the top of the clay. Open it up. I'm actually creating a little bowl. Now this rim is pretty thick, and that's necessary. It's also angled, because now I'm going to pinch the clay between my thumb and my fingertips, and there's the step. That's the ledge that's going to rest on the top of the rim. Now let's pull this neck up.
Bill makes the neck 3/4 of an inch deep so it sits securely in the teapot. Then he measures the lid.
Now I'm going to use this ruler rather than a pair of calipers. This works better for me. That looks pretty good. So let's clean this up. Now the thickness of the walls of this lid are like the pot, 1/4 of an inch, maybe a fraction less. I'm going to use the tip of my undercutting tool and create a wedge or a bevel underneath the lid. Use my cutoff wire and quickly pull it beneath the lid. I'm going to make the spout next. Now again, I'm going to create this sort of doorknob of clay and open it with my thumb tip. Now something that's important design-wise and function-wise on a teapot. This area where the spout joins the pot has got to be big. It's got to have some volume to it. That gathers the liquid from the pot and forces it up this spout. If this is a small area, your teapot's going to go bloop, 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 which we don't want. We want it to pour nice and smooth.
To make the spout, Bill throws a tall cylinder, tapering it as he pulls up the wall.
Watch what I do here. Push outward and then inward. Outward with my inside hand and then inward with my outside hand. Now I'm going to use my fingertips and I'm going to form a sort of collar around the bottom part and lightly stroke them upwards. When I tapered this wall inward, I thickened it. And we've got to thin it out again. But that hole's too small to fit my fingers inside. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush here and use my fingers on the outside, pushing the clay against the brush and lightly drawing it upward. Does 2 things. Thins the wall, but it also smooths the inside surface of the spout. And that's important because it's going to give us a nice smooth pour. Liquid will flow easily out of the spout. How do I get this off here? I'm going to remove the slit, cut it loose, and pick it up with my fingertips.
Bill gives the spout a little extra shape as he removes the slip with a rubber rib. He's very careful at this stage because the spout is about 1/8 of an inch thick.
Okay, the next step is to cut the spout loose from the lump of clay. Before I do that, I want to show you something. This spout is attached to the teapot at an angle. So I'm going to make the cut on the spout at this point at an angle. That's going to work pretty well. All right, as soon as the parts to my teapot are soft leather hard, I'm going to trim them and get them assembled.
Coming up on DIY's Leather Hard. Now Bill is ready to assemble the pieces.
First thing I like to do is make sure the lid fits. It's a perfect fit. A little bit of a shake, not too much.
To trim, Bill throws a clay pad on the wheel. First, he'll trim the base of the body.
I'm just going to take off the sharp bevel at the bottom of the teapot. Kind of rounds off the foot, but it also lightens the weight of the teapot.
Bill dampens the trimmed area and burnishes it with an old credit card. Now, he'll trim the lid and add a knob.
Now my teapot has a curve here. I'm going to continue that curve right across the top of the lid. I like this profile. It's going to match the shoulder of the teapot really well. The next step is to attach a knob to the top of the lid. I'm going to use a small coil of clay. I'm going to put a little texture on this knob. I've got these wooden handle boards. They're corrugated. Let's take a piece of coil. And I get this twisted surface. Now, these corrugated lines are going to tie in visually with these lines on the facets. That'll bring the side of the teapot to the top of the teapot.
Bill dampens the area where he'll attach the knob. Then he trims the knob to the right length, bends it, and presses it onto the lid.
I'm going to use a small piece of wooden dowel and finish the ends off by pressing them tightly to the lid surface. The next step is to put a little ledge at the bottom of this neck. I'm going to use a small piece of clay, roll it into a really short fat cylinder, wet the surface of it, and glue it and press it right here. Now, why am I doing this? When we pour liquid, hot liquid from a teapot, this whole pot gets pretty hot. You're not going to want to hold this lid on as you do the pouring. So we created this little device. So when I tip this over and it's pouring hot tea, the lid might want to fall out, but we've created this little tab at the neck that holds it in place. One more thing to do to this lid. This is actually a pretty complicated little piece of clay. I'm going to put a hole right through the lid. It's going to be a little less than 1/4 of an inch big, and I've put it right above the tab.
The hole allows air into the teapot to displace the liquid that's leaving through the spout. This ensures the teapot pours smoothly.
The next step to making the teapot is attaching the spout. Let me show you how I do it. I do it a bit differently than a lot of other potters. I'm going to wet the end of this teapot spout. This is the surface that gets attached to the pot. I'm going to thin out the top third of it. Just a little bit of pinching. Now, of course, it's obvious we've got to create some hole here to let the liquid into the spout. And where do you do that? Let me show you. The tip of this spout should be level or just about level with the top of the teapot. If it's down here, you can only fill this teapot this deep because liquid's going to start to run out of the pot here. So I'm going to wet this one final time, set it on the side of the pot, and remove it. Now, there's a circle here. Within that circle is where I'm going to cut a pattern of holes. Now, this series of holes becomes a strainer, keeps the tea inside the pot, but lets the liquid out.
There's no fixed pattern to the holes Bill cuts. As long as the aggregate amount of clay removed is more than the size of the spout's opening, the liquid will flow out well.
Now I'm going to wet the area around the strainer, just a little bit of water. Set the spout in place and lightly push it on. Now, because I thinned it out at the top, it smoothly glides into the shoulder of this teapot. I'm going to press it with a slightly damp thumb tip. Now, as I attach this spout, I'm not only looking at this connection, but I'm looking at the whole curvature of the piece. I want it to flow, kind of like a tree branch, right from the teapot outward.
Bill wipes the joint with a damp sponge.
And you know, just that pushing on, that's enough to secure it. As long as the two pieces are about the same degree of dryness when you make the attachment.
Next on DIY's Throwing Clay.
Okay, the last step is to attach a handle to the back of the teapot. I'm going to make it and set it exactly across from the spout. And I'm going to pull it directly from the teapot. It makes for a really strong attachment. Let me show you how I do it.
Bill pounds a lump of clay into a carrot shape. He wets the clay and stretches it to form a handle blank.
So I'm going to wet the two areas where the handle will be attached. And usually this is best done without the lid in place.
With a dry hand, Bill tears off the end of the handle blank and softens the corners. Then he dampens the end and presses it securely to the teapot.
Pick it up, again with a really clean hand, and dip it into the water. I'm slowly stretching the clay downward, and I'm making sure visually that it's directly across from the spout.
There are several handle designs that work well on teapots. Bill's put instructions on making different handles on DIYnetwork.com.
Lastly, I want to put a few lines on it, something to catch the glaze. Now I'm holding on to the end of the handle, turn the pot, make my attachment. I want to make sure that I have enough loop here to keep my fingers away from the hot teapot. So it could be a little bigger. I'm going to push it up from the bottom and then lean it forward. Now I like the forward motion of this handle. In addition to the forward motion of the spout, this whole thing says, pour me. And that's what we're going to eventually do with it. So let's make our final attachment here.
With wet fingers, Bill spreads out the clay where it attaches to the bottom of the pot. Then he smooths away the sharp edges with a sponge.
I like my teapot. Now I'm going to let it dry until it's bone dry. Then there's one more thing we've got to do to it before we put it in the kiln for its first firing.
Before Bill loads the bone-dry teapot into the kiln for the bisque firing, he sands the strainer holes and the hole in the lid lightly. The kiln fires for about 10 to 12 hours and then cools for another 24 hours. Now Bill can glaze the teapot. He'll do a double dip, teal blue and raspberry red. Combined, they make a zippy purple color.
Before we can dip it into a glaze, though, we've got to apply some wax and keep the parts of the pot separated.
First, he waxes the neck and lip of the lid. Then he waxes the base. Finally, he waxes the rim where the lid touches the body.
We're going to coat each part of our teapot in the teal blue glaze first. Now you make sure this hole is clear. And now the large teapot. So I'm going to hold on the waxed areas as carefully as I can. 1, 2, 3, and out.
Bill fettles the lid and the teapot. Then he adds a few wax lines so the raspberry red doesn't coat the entire surface of the lid and the pot.
Now this wax band at the top of the teapot has a dual purpose. One, it's going to let the blue glaze shine through the red one, which is what I'm looking for. But two, and more importantly, it keeps that double glaze thickness from getting near the edge of the lid. So when they fire in the kiln, there's no chance that this lid will get stuck by glaze to the teapot base.
Bill makes the second dip in raspberry red. Then he fettles the pieces once again to remove the excess glaze.
Like I said, it's a complicated project, but I like a challenge. Let's go put it in the kiln.
Bill fires the kiln for about 10 to 12 hours to melt the glazes to a glassy finish. After another 24 hours or so, he unloads the teapot.
You want to avoid shocking your teapot with hot boiling water. So preheat it first with a little bit of hot tap water. I'm Potter Bill Van Gilder. Enjoy your time in the studio.